Okay, so welcome to this week's episode of the Python People podcast. And today we are very honoured to be joined by none other than Christina Finlay. Christina, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Not a problem at all. So, Christina, for those of you who are, those people out there that have yet to have the pleasure of meeting you, you are the Director of Data and Insight for the National Trust. And we kind of had a chat quite recently and discussed how I think, certainly where we are as a kind of business society at the moment, data is seemingly becoming very front and center for a lot of businesses in terms of their kind of strategy moving forward in light of the pandemic and sort of recent world events. And we thought it'd be quite useful for us to sort of put our heads together and certainly for you to kind of share your perspective based on your experiences as a senior leader within technology and your kind of expertise on how you actually go about creating that data culture. Because obviously you've done that many times to date in various roles. And, I think it's very easy for a lot of businesses to say, we want to be more data centric, but, how do you actually go about doing that? And I think that's, something we thought would be quite interesting to put a bit of context and a bit of definition around. So I guess, I'll start, if I may, by asking you the question, when we sort of talk about being data driven and being data centric, what does that actually mean? What's the true meaning of being a data driven business in your opinion?
I think for me, it's really that you're not making decisions based on a hunch. I've been in quite a few organizations. I worked for a lovely organization in Canada, but a lot of decisions were kind of off the fly. And by bringing in kind of and starting to use the data that an organization has, I think organizations start to see how useful that is. And so for me, I guess it's just that really simple definition of, you use the data that you have to make the decisions and to derive kind of future things that you're going to do, product development or any kind of marketing, for example.
Yeah, I think that's a really good definition, because it is something that I think often people try and overcomplicate as well when they're sort of talking about. It's a very sexy term, isn't it, being data driven in today's world? Yeah. But yeah, I guess it is just making. I kind of see it as making informed decisions, based on actually looking at your data and understanding what's going on with the data, because so many businesses don't operate in that way from what I can see, in terms of really fully looking at their data to kind of help them make decisions, as much as a pretty obvious statement, but just making fully informed decisions. So yeah, I totally would agree with that. So based on your kind of experience to date, having gone into many businesses, established data functions from scratch, different silos, different verticals within a data remit. What do you foresee as some of the most important factors to consider when you're creating that data culture within a business?
I think for me the first thing to start is to ask yourself why. Why do you want to be data driven? Why do you want to drive a data culture? Because it's not the thing that every organization needs. Some organizations just need to use their data to make decisions. They don't need to be truly data driven. They don't need to have data drive every decision that they're making within their organization. So probably the first thing to think about is why do we want to do this? The next thing for me, kind of thinking about is probably things like, where do you want to go? How is data going to drive your future, the future of your business? What are you going to do, and what's your start point? And then start thinking about the culture that you want to create. And for me, once you have that future state and your current state, then I feel like for the most part, I'm just kind of a sheepdog. I'm just kind of nudging people along. You say that the idea of having the future state means that everyone knows where we're going, and theoretically they know their role within it. But so often what I find is that it's really just kind of a test and learn approach. It's kind of a, hey, let's try this today. Is this going to work? And you see what takes off. As we implemented Tableau at the National Trust, one of the things that I saw was, the first time I saw, competitions. Who wants to do competitions? Totally not my thing. I really didn't think it would work. But genuinely, weekly competitions was the thing that got people throughout the organization, all of our data champions, really using data and really understanding. All the subject matter experts were really using the data to drive some analysis and to make some decisions. So I think for me, in terms of embedding or putting in some kind of data culture, you really have to kind of know what's going to tick in your organization, what's going to make people kind of work, and just kind of have empathy and think about them, and then try a whole bunch of different things. There's a lot of literature, there's a lot of stuff that you can look at in terms of training, in terms of communications, in terms of all sorts of different things. But really, it's just don't overthink it, just start doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's great advice in many walks of life, I guess, isn't it? Absolutely, when you're trying to instill a culture, but you mentioned there, kind of touching upon, kind of data professionals in terms of, what maybe instilling something like competitions or whatever to kind of help, drive the performance or engagement, however you want to kind of term it. I don't know how you feel about this, but I think in my experience of my time within recruitment, I've kind of seen quite a shift in the mindset and the attitude towards data over the last few years. Of, historically, it's always been a very kind of technically focused domain. For uber intelligent people with brains the size of planets, that kind of very good at the numerate side of things, which I'm sure it probably is to a more or less a degree still in many ways. But now that I think there's been this sort of movement or shift towards actually data, what it means to the business, in terms of solving the business problem. It's less of a technical focused thing now, and it's more of using technology to obviously solve the business issue at hand. And do you see there's been a change in kind of what motivates people that you manage within the data remit? Is there something that kind of keeps data professionals motivated, engaged, from what you've seen over the last few years?
I would say it's probably down to a human thing. We all want to know that we're valued, and data professionals are no different than anyone else. So for me, my role, you talked about the, yes, it has been a very technical thing full of, uber bright professionals. And now we're moving to a place where it's kind of embedding, and it's in every walk of life. And how do you make that translation? And what's the shift in people? I think we still need all those technical people, but what they need to know. And I call myself a translator, because I think I have to speak the language first of the business and then of the technical people, and help to get the message of the business back to the technical people. What I find is that the data professionals, the biggest motivator is for their work to be seen by the COO or whoever it might be. We had an all hands call a couple of weeks ago. There was a dashboard up in the presentation that our executive was making. And seriously, right, we use WebEx. Seriously, the pings on the WebEx was incredible. Everyone was so excited within the team. And I don't think that has changed. I think what has changed is our need to do better translation, to embed in analytics in a different way, and much more about less the engineering, much more about the visualization, probably. But the people, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and I think in many ways that's possibly one of the really positive things that's happened in terms of the culture within data now, that many professionals within a data function, data engineers, data scientists, they do genuinely see the work they're doing making a huge impact on the business problem. So I guess that kind of, like I say, that recognition piece about what motivates people, that's something obviously that I'm sure applies to many different areas of kind of psychology. But I think that is one of the great things now within data, is it's actually genuinely making that shift over, and people can kind of see exactly what they're working on and how that really impacts the bigger picture. That must be a great place to be as a leader within technology, when you've got people that kind of see that connection.
Yeah, I think it really is. I think one of the things that I see is that neither side sees exactly that match. So when I'm talking to executives, for example, they don't know what they don't know. They don't know that they can have things in a certain way. So I kind of have to listen to them, understand what they're doing, and in my head translate. And then the technical teams don't know what they don't know either. So they don't know exactly what will embed and what will kind of work exactly and get their data or their dashboard or whatever it is into that executive presentation. So for me, that translator role is really important. as we kind of go forward of making sure that we're bridging that gap.
Absolutely, yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, bear in mind your kind of experience of going in and being able to execute these strategies and these plans. I'm sure you'd probably be the first to say that I'm sure not every single one of them has gone totally smoothly, and there's been a few sort of hurdles along the way, as indeed any leader, any manager will encounter at any stage of their journey. But is there something from your kind of experience? Is there something you feel that usually gets overlooked, or any kind of pitfalls, that people often assume when it kind of comes to actually trying to implement a data culture?
I think any strategist in any kind of profession would probably say, you write it down and you have your checklists and you think, well, this is it, this is perfect, everything I've done, I've got everything through. No matter what, there's always the people, and you can never anticipate how people are going to act and what they're going to do and how they're going to think. And I'm not saying people are a pitfall, but people are something that you can never really anticipate how they're going to react. And so that's just humanity. That's how people are. So that's probably quite an important thing to kind of think through as you go in, because they'll make it or break it.
Yeah.
I think the other pitfall that I have seen, and obviously you learn as you go through your career, is not really listening to what the business needs, and really aligning what you're doing to the business strategy. Because for me, that's because it's for people like me, it's all just fascinating. Oh, we could do so many things with this data, but you don't need to. What you need to do is to do what you're going to do with the data to align the business strategy, to write the business strategy, to make the business happen. And that's kind of back to what I was saying at the beginning of, not every business needs to be data driven. Some just need to be kind of enabled with data.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point that you mentioned there around people, and your kind of reason for doing what you're doing as a leader could be totally a positive, a change maybe that you're bringing into the business could be a totally positive one in your eyes. But often when you I'm just thinking back to my experience of being a manager in recruitment, you could make a decision in a boardroom that you think, this is going to be a great decision, everyone's going to really enjoy it, everyone's going to really love it, and then you kind of go and you sort of roll out what you've discussed to the floor of people, and then everyone's like, what, this is immediate, this kind of affront. And I guess you kind of but I suppose that's similar to all sort of managerial challenges in terms of taking people on a journey, isn't it? And kind of doing that.
And I think that, they say every kind of strategist, you're meant to involve people in strategy building. And I completely agree. But I think in rolling out a strategy, that's where I believe in the test and learn approach. It's kind of a try this, how's it working, keep going. And when you're dealing with people, for me, the most important thing is what's in it for them. What are they going to get out of it? Because if you don't do that, they will just feel put upon.
Yes.
They'll just feel like you're just trying to change what they do, or what they're doing is wrong, rather than you thinking, this is going to be great for you. Come on.
Absolutely. I mean, to that point, actually, do you feel sometimes you have to be conscious and careful about even some of the language that you use when speaking to sort of non-tech, and I don't mean that kind of in a disparaging way, but just in terms of, when you're through our eyes or through the lens of anybody that's sort of on the data side, maybe the term a data-driven culture is a really positive one, isn't it? It sounds like really exciting because, it's kind of, we're coming more into the fore in the business. But, if you're not necessarily sat on that side of the business historically, do you feel that sometimes, people are going, hang on a minute, use the word culture, that's quite emotionally charged at the best of times anyway, isn't it? So do you feel like sometimes you have to be quite selective about the language that you use when sort of speaking to other parts of the business about, what it is you're actually implementing and what you're trying to drive and what you're trying to do?
I rarely use the word data, and which sounds terrible, because it's kind of, I use the phrase making evidence-based decisions, and the reason that is that everyone goes, well, that's a great thing, of course we want to do that, whereas making data-driven decisions makes it sound like I've got an agenda, that I want to get my thing making decisions, rather than something about what they want. So again, it's kind of back to the thinking about, what does the business need? The business that I work for right now doesn't necessarily think it needs data to make all its decisions, but when you say evidence, when you use the word evidence, absolutely. I wouldn't say that every organization wants a data culture as well. What they want is an efficient and effective culture, which to me is what a data culture does. It helps you be effective and efficient in making decisions. It helps you drive and see opportunities. And so it really depends on what kind of organization it is that you want to use the careful words that they would use themselves.
Yeah, very good point. Absolutely. And I guess when you talk about efficiency and effectiveness, I mean, in your experience, I appreciate every business has got a different, purpose, I guess, and a different kind of makeup in terms of how it's structured. But in terms of how you sort of foresee, let's say you're a business at the moment, you do want to move that shift over towards data, being more data driven, creating more of a true data culture. Is there a particular kind of optimal structure that you see in terms of what a data department should look like? So I'm talking about in terms of different functions that maybe sit within the data umbrella, sort of even down to things like team sizes and management hierarchy. Do you have any kind of overriding sort of views on that from your experience?
I'll say it all depends because it does. I think for me, in terms of organizational structure, it depends on probably three things. The first is what is your data strategy? Because within your data strategy, which should be aligned to the business strategy, you'll have worked out what your operating model is. Do you want to be self-serve? Do you want to be hub and spoke? What's your operating model for data? So that will determine quite a lot. The second is that when you think about the level of maturity of the organization, are they an organization that is really happy using data, or are they an organization that is scared of charts and graphs, which is a low data maturity organization? I think the other probably is the level of investment and the criticality, the pace that the organization works at. Those three things would determine the size of the team and how many different people you need. My feeling is, I kind of feel like no matter what, you probably need to get in your senior person first, because they will be able to tell you, do you need 4 people or do you need 20 people? What is that? Because probably the most important thing is the second thing I said, which is the data maturity. If you're a really early on data maturity organization, you probably need more senior people to help you put in the right technology, to build the right processes, to kind of get things going. And once you have some momentum, you probably don't need quite a senior team, unless your organization is changing or your business strategy is changing. So I can't give you you need 10 people and they need to be these different functions, because it definitely depends on those things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. And you said something quite interesting there about the maturity of the business in terms of how self-serving, the end user or the business potentially will end up being. And to play devil's advocate, I mean, do you feel that it's the purpose and the kind of responsibility and the duty really of a CDO, kind of someone at the top that's driving the data strategy, to eventually almost make themselves redundant, in terms of being out of the job, because the business does really have that capability of being fully self-serving, have the tools that they need to make those decisions themselves. They're engaged and interested in using those tools to get that data to make those decisions. Because I guess in many ways, people not from a data background becoming self-serving and using that data themselves to make those decisions to sort of enable their performance, really, I guess, is probably the most data-driven a business can be. So what's your sort of thoughts on where the boundaries should lie between the business being self-serving with regards to the data they can access and reports they can run, etc., versus the data function's ability to serve their customers, so to speak?
Yeah, I think so. For me, the hub and spoke, kind of that middle zone, is probably always the right one, because it's a compromise. Everything's a compromise. I think on your first point, is it the CDO's job to actually do themselves out of a job? And I would say yes. I think in many cases, yes, that is the case. When we build a data science model, we find opportunities, we find out what's driving things, and then we aim to fix. And once we've broken the model, we need to move on to a new model. And for me, a CDO, it's the exact same thing. You come in, you work out what the organization needs, you find those drivers of what's going to make it tick, you set that in motion, and then you go, okay, right? You probably don't need someone as senior as me anymore. The hub and spoke model, to me, is brilliant. It has it pitfalls in terms of the self-serve model. the biggest pitfall is that you need to make sure that you have some standards in place and some governance and quality standards to make sure that there's consistency in the analytics that get out to the organization. If you don't have I feel like the buzzword of the year is single source of the truth. If you don't have a single source of the truth, then you have people making different decisions based on what they think is the real truth, the real data. And what you find is actually they're using two different data sets. And that's inconsistent for the organization. So if you're going to do hub and spoke, for me, definitely it's about having a single source of the truth and then doing your hub and spoke model.
Sure. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, the actual kind of execution of these strategies and I guess from an effectiveness point of view, but also just from a fulfillment point of view, for somebody such as yourself as a senior leader within data and technology, do you feel there's any particular pros or cons or advantages or disadvantages of rolling out true data strategy or creating a data culture within a business, whether it's a smaller kind of maybe startup type business or whether it's a larger, bigger blue chip kind of organization? Do you see often sort of advantages and disadvantages of being able to establish a data culture in where they sit on that spectrum?
I'll start with what is probably easier. The one big disadvantage is that it will need to change, and that you can spend time doing a data strategy and then 2 years happen, technology is all different and people are different, and you need to kind of do it again. So that's, to me, probably the only disadvantage, because the advantages really, really outweigh. It's a matter of stepping back and thinking, are we doing this right? Are we on the right path? And probably most importantly, are you getting everybody on that bus with you? Whether it's on the team or in the organization, does everybody understand what you're trying to do and also their role within it? That is probably the most important bit, is because you can't do this alone. You can't do this as a CDO or as a leader of a team. You can't be alone in doing. You need everyone else to change what they do. If you're going to change any kind of culture or do any kind of change management thing, you need to make sure that other people are changing what they do.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So yes to a data strategy, definitely.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay. And I guess as a kind of maybe a takeaway message based around all of your lessons to date in small organizations, bigger organizations, more mature functions versus startup kind of functions within data, is there a kind of a number one lesson or a key share that you think, based on your own personal experiences, is important for someone else that's about to embark upon this journey?
So many lessons. The biggest thing I think is just empathy. And I think that for me, that has been, it's no longer a secret if I get this out now, but the secret to my success has been empathy. Because what I think, all of my time spent kind of, looking at and doing consumer research, I take that now into my role. And I think when I'm talking to business leaders, I think, what is it you really need? What is it that you need that you can't even verbalize? And how can I exceed your expectations? If I have empathy, I'm really getting myself in their shoes. I'm really understanding what they need. If I'm thinking about my team, I want to make them happy. I want to get them motivated by having empathy, by sitting down and understanding who they are and empathizing with who they are. I think that helps me to really get to them and motivate them and work out what's in it for them. So for me, probably the one lesson I've learned is make sure you've got empathy.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think it's been really interesting speaking with you actually and hearing your perspective on these things. But I've been really fascinated with, and I guess it's probably to do with the high level that you're operating at, in terms of how a lot of the answers have been focused around people, and psychology as well, rather than sort of focusing too into the nitty gritty of pure technology. And I think this probably goes back to the point we were talking about earlier of the people that are genuinely capable of going into a business and sort of executing a real working data strategy and creating a data culture, is that awareness that it's so much more than a set of technology sort of taped together. It's about winning hearts and minds, isn't it? And I guess sort of extending that to the wider psychology of what it is to be a good leader, and kind of a good manager. But it's been really interesting to kind of hear your perspective on that and how it does sort of marry together with the world of technology and data.
It's definitely more than just the technology. You can do a lot of really great things when your technology isn't super great yet. And I think it's to me, the success is always the people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, perfect. Lovely. Well, absolutely fantastic to speak to you, Christina. Thank you very much for your time. I think some really interesting insights shared there. So thank you again for being a guest today. And wish you all the very best for the future. And look forward to hopefully speaking to you again very soon.
Great. Thanks, Guy. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. Bye for now.
Bye.